For women of worth, I'm Michelle Martin. Coping with a loved one that needs round-the-clock medical care can be expensive, and the care hard to find. According to advocacy group Aware, 10 times more women than men who drop out of the workforce cite caregiving as the main reason why. But how affordable and therefore how real an option is trained live-in caregivers here in Singapore? CEO of Active Global, Yorel Kalika, joins me now. Active Global is a company that offers specialized caregiving services. Yorel, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you for having me.
Now, the options for many seem to be domestic helper, a nursing home, or a professional nurse. Can you start by giving us an overview of how your specialized caregivers compare to these options?
Absolutely. So, first of all, our caregivers are really quite affordable. Because the monthly cost of a caregiver would be anywhere between $600 and $1,000, and that's really for full-time care. So it's really important. This level of affordability allows families who are middle class, even lower middle class income, to afford a professional caregiver. When it comes to comparing to other caregiving options such as nursing homes, domestic helper, or family caregivers, each of them, of course, have their own benefits. But what I want to highlight is that our option, a living caregiver, is really truly one-on-one professional care. So, for instance, in a nursing home, the staff-to-patient ratio would be really disadvantageous to the patient because you would have only one staff for, let's say, 5 to 10 patients, whereas our living caregivers are solely focusing on one patient. So that's one. The other thing is nursing homes typically would be more expensive on a daily basis than a living caregiver. An unsubsidized nursing home in Singapore can be as high as $80 per day, whereas a living caregiver would be around $30 per day. With regards to domestic helpers, of course their salary would be cheaper than one of our living caregivers because they are untrained. However, because they are usually untrained, they are not able to really truly give good medical care. And even if some of our domestic helpers actually get good training, then the problem often is that they are not empowered to give sufficient care. Not everything can be trained. For instance, attitude cannot be trained to a large extent. And when it comes to caring for stroke patients, stroke patients amount for roughly half of our patients today in Singapore. Compliance to a rehab routine is extremely important. And to have a patient comply with the rehab routine, well, sometimes you have to push them a little because, not every day every patient wants to go for rehab or do their rehab exercise. But it's for their own good, right, that they have to do their rehab routine. And a domestic helper typically would not be empowered to give the push and give the motivation to the patient to follow the rehab and follow the doctor's instructions to get better. Whereas our caregivers, because they are trained nurses, would typically be very empowered, and because they are trained, they would have the authority, and the patient would listen to them better and therefore follow the rehab routine. The third option that you mentioned, family caregivers, really, you mentioned the numbers from Aware. Actually, today, according to MOM, 42,000 women have dropped out of the workforce to care for their elderly relatives. There are many challenges for family caregivers. One of them is obviously a woman who drops out of the workforce to care for elderly. She would lose her immediate income. And the second one is that she also loses the power to save for her future. So she will have an impoverished future. So there's the financial challenge, of course. There is also the fact that very often, although, of course, they are, very well-meaning family members, especially in an Asia context, really want to do the best for their loved ones, and they would not hesitate to sacrifice their career to care for an elderly relative. However, there are really questions about whether this is the best option for the elderly. When it comes for caring, when it comes to caring for dementia patients, for instance, it can be very, very painful for, let's say, a daughter to see a mother's memories fading away. Actually, the mother's behavioral issues might be better taken care of by somebody who is not emotionally linked to the patient. So a professional caregiver would handle the behavioral problems of the patient much more professionally because she doesn't have the emotional attachment.
You mentioned that half of the patients, I think that you service are stroke patients. Can you share a little bit about the range of patients that need specialized caregiving that Active Global has served?
Yes, stroke is a good half of our patients. We also have a large proportion of our patients who have dementia.
Right.
That's probably another 40%. And the balance, 10%, would be a mix of cancer patients, Parkinson's patients, and other various diseases.
Because you also offer end-of-life or respite care, correct?
Correct. So, for instance, many cancer patients, their family would come to us when the cancer is at stage 4, and we are basically an alternative to. We offer the option to have your end-of-life at home.
What is the range of tasks that the specialized caregiver from Active Global provides?
So, because they are professionals, they would, of course, first and foremost focus on the care of the patient, and the care has several aspects. Of course, there is the medical care, giving the medication, caring for the activities of daily living, but also making sure that the patient takes enough exercise. So depending on the patient's ability, of course, this exercise can vary. But even a bedbound patient, we can do some passive exercise. So we take care of that. So prevention of bed sores, of course. But the psychosocial aspects are also very important. So engaging the patient in various meaningful activities. Can be playing games, going down for an ice cream, for a walk, caring for the dog, meeting with family members, going down on the void deck to meet with friends and play a game of cards or whatever activities the patient used to like in their adult life and active life. We would like to use this as a guideline to drive the schedule of the patient, to really make sure they don't get bored and they don't get depressed.
Because your caregivers work under a foreign domestic worker permit, what protects the caregiver from being expected to also help with chores at home?
That's a very good question. So we have several things we do several things to address that. The first thing is the way we advertise ourselves and we present ourselves. We are very clear that our caregivers are professionals and they should not be expected to also do household chores. The second thing is that in the contract, we really specify very clearly the scope of work, and whenever there is, something that doesn't have to do with nursing care and caregiving, we would really specify it in the contract and make sure that both parties agree. The third thing is we provide our caregivers with uniform, name tags, additional trainings, tablets, and so on, so that they cannot be confused with a normal domestic helper, let's say.
You mentioned tablets, so they're given IT software as well?
So the tablets have actually several functions. All of our caregivers are given an Android tablet, so they can stay with this tablet. They are on our agency's Facebook group, so they can exchange information, access some trainings, and so on. They have access on their tablet to 200 hours of trainings. Although all of our caregivers are trained before we hire them, many of them want to refresh their knowledge on some specific topics. We also load on the tablet for them some language training apps so that they can, learn, relevant languages that their patients speak.
I understand.
And finally, they can also keep in touch with their family, which is very important.
You're listening to WOW, or Women of Worth. I'm Michelle Martin. Today, finding out how accessible specialized caregiving in Singapore is. WOW continues after this. Welcome to WOW. I'm Michelle Martin. This is a show that looks at issues that are meaningful for women but important to us all. How accessible is specialized caregiving in Singapore? Active Global offers such services. I wanted to check out more about what the firm offers Singaporeans as an option for live-in medically trained caregivers. CEO of Active Global, Yorel Kalika, is my special guest today. Yorel told us in the first part of the program that a monthly caregiver salary ranges from about $600 to $1,000. That, of course, depends on experience and complexity. Yorel, tell us, are there a range of schemes or grants that Singaporeans can turn to bring the cost down, or is this 600 to 1,000 sort of a range that happens after tapping on certain grants?
600 to 1,000 is usually net.
Now, tell us a little bit about your caregivers. You mentioned that all are medically trained. How do you certify their training? Because I imagine they come from many different countries, right?
Yes, so our caregivers come from 5 different countries: India, Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Indonesia, and the Philippines. And they basically have they can have 3 different levels of training. So the most advanced training could be a diploma or degree of nursing. There is an intermediate level of training which we call auxiliary nurse. It's usually 2 years of nursing school. And there is a more basic level of training which is called nursing aid. It's usually a 3-month basic nursing training. When they apply, our caregivers are classified along these 3 buckets, and we interview them based on their level. Our interviewer is a nurse with 25 years of nursing experience, and she asks questions to our caregivers that I don't know the answers of, because I'm a business person, I'm not a nurse. So only a nurse or somebody who has been trained as a nurse can answer these questions. So that's how we check the certification of our caregivers. Right. The second thing is that whenever a client chooses a caregiver, there's always a Skype interview between the client, or usually the family of the patient, and the caregiver. And that's a way to recheck if the skills of the caregiver are specifically well matched to the very patient, because not all nurses have the same specialties. So that's another way to check.
You also offer the option of male caregivers. Now, what clients and which conditions are male caregivers typically suited for?
So in Singapore context, it's actually quite complicated to get approval for a male caregiver. So the case has to be very strong and justified by a doctor's note that specifically explains why a woman cannot take care of this patient. So it could be a patient who is very heavy, who has behavioral problems, who is aggressive and so on. But there has to be a very strong justification, otherwise you would not be able to get a work permit.
I can imagine how, someone who has a father who has had a stroke might have just a preference for a male caregiver as well, but that wouldn't be sufficient?
Probably not. We look at, now that we have some history of applying for male caregivers, my team knows which cases have good chances of being approved and which chances are probably not strong enough. The bottom line that if a female can do the job, then a female should do the job. Of course, it could evolve in the future, but I think that's the current policy.
How long have you been in Singapore, Yorel? Active Global?
Personally, I've been here since 2007, so 9 years.
And Active Global has been in operation since then, 2007?
Started 3 years ago, exactly 3 years ago, in April 2013.
Tell me a little bit about how demand has evolved in that 3 years.
You see, in the beginning, we got most of our calls directly referred to us from the public hospitals, because the general public was not really aware about our service, whereas now I would say we get around half of our calls from public hospitals referrals, and the other half comes from the general public, because the awareness about our service has really risen. In terms of the demand, we see a steady demand for the common long-term care illnesses. So I would say stroke, dementia. You see, we have at least 50,000 stroke patients in Singapore and 50,000 dementia patients in Singapore right now.
Yes. And I'm sure with an aging population, those numbers are going to increase, and there will be increasing interest in what you offer, which is round-the-clock specialized caregivers. What do you make of the ease of navigating the field of caregiving options here?
I think that Singaporeans are actually quite lucky to have a range of affordable options. Of course, having more options is, makes the choice complex here. But I must say, having an agency for integrated care helps people navigate to the various options. Mm-hmm. There are many CWOs who are also doing a very good job at giving part-time care. And of course, we complement these government services with a full-time care option, which is affordable. So at the end of the day, I think government services, medical social workers in the hospitals do a very good job at helping people figure out what is the best option for them.
As a female entrepreneur, tell us a bit about why you wanted to provide a service like this in Singapore.
You see, before starting this company, I was a management consultant for a very long time. So I always wanted to start a business. And when the time was right, I started thinking, all right, I want to do something that is obviously going to be very successful because I'm putting all my savings in it. But I also want it to be very meaningful. I want to get up in the morning and believe in what I'm doing and have the sense of usefulness. So for me, that was the perfect that was the perfect market for it. Really addresses both the meaningfulness and the success has been there. So I'm very grateful so far for the journey, the entrepreneurial journey of the past 3 years.
Now, from a labor perspective, and I know many potential employers would want to hear this question asked, what sort of a commission do you take from the caregivers themselves?
So I think one of our key advantages and the reason we've been able to grow so fast is that we are not taking any money from the caregivers. We are only charging the employers a one-time fee of $2,000, and that's it. You see, in today's world, Singapore is not the only market that is aging very fast, and there's really truly a competition for healthcare talent. So the fact that we are able to offer jobs to foreign caregivers without charging them a penny is really a very good competitive advantage for us and to attract very good talent to Singapore.
So when it comes to their flights, moving over here, your caregivers don't get into any debt.
Don't take any debt. Don't get into any debt.
We've been finding out more about specialized caregiving in Singapore as offered by Active Global. This is Wow, a Women of Worth. My guest today has been CEO of Active Global, Yorel Kalika. Thanks for listening.